This is the reality. Now, where does Africa fit into this? Let me start with the basic demographics. In 1950, Africa was 9% of the world population, around 250 million people in a world of 2.5 to 3 billion people. Today, Africa is 18% of the world population, twice the share of what it was in 1950, with 1.4 billion people. Today, Africa has the same population as China and India. But while China is now at a peak and is in population decline, that will be quite significant, by the way, during this century, so that China's population by the end of the 21st century will be under 1 billion people, maybe even below 800 million people. And India's population will stabilize at something like 1.7 billion people. Africa's population is so young that there is a tremendous population growth built in to Africa till the end of the century. So Africa's population will be 2.5 billion people at mid-century. That means around 25% of the world population. So from 9% to 18% today to 25% at mid-century. And at least on current trajectory, I think it's probably not correct, but on the current extrapolation, with a gradually declining fertility rate, Africa reaches about 3.7 billion people by the end of the 21st century. And that is about 35% of the world population. It may not reach that level because the fertility rate, in my view, will come down more rapidly than what is in this medium forecast of the UN. But Africa's population will reach 3 billion people. And that means that Africa will be a third of the world population, up from 9% in 1950. What about the economics? We are in a golden age of technology right now. We are in the most amazing acceleration of technological know-how in history. Everything has accelerated. If you launch ChatGPT 1 month, within the next month there are 100 million users. Within 6 months there are 500 million users. We've never had an uptake of technology at this speed in history. So if this technological know-how is properly utilized, the ability of Africa to achieve what China achieved, double-digit growth for 4 decades, is absolutely realistic. This is the main point. Africa can achieve a dramatic advance. What is happening in this city in Addis Ababa, which is exactly that kind of double-digit growth, so that if you come, as we do, each year to the AU summit, you see a city transformed from one year to the next. That can be Africa's general reality, not only in Addis Ababa, but across the continent. And incidentally, Africa's growth will be urban-based growth. Africa today is maybe 40 or 45% urban, although we have to be very careful on definitions because what is urban and what is rural is somewhat arbitrary in definition. And a lot of rural areas are really pretty urban already, with a lot of non-agricultural employment. But Africa will be 60 or 70% urban by around 2060 or 2070. And the basic reason, by the way, is that agriculture will be mechanized everywhere. Don't think that rising agricultural productivity means better jobs in agriculture. It means an elimination of jobs in agriculture, as it has everywhere in the world. In the US, which has the most advanced agriculture in the world, together with Canada, we have 1% of our population in agriculture. And Africa's share of the population in agriculture will decline to below 10%, probably within 30 or 40 years. And that means an urban Africa, and that means what you're observing in Addis Ababa, that will be true all over Africa. So think about the big cities and the regional cities. They will be the growth poles for this rapid economic development. What will it take for Africa to achieve this kind of dynamism? Basically, be like China or be like India. Unified, integrated structure, continental scale economy with a continental scale policy and plan. That's what it will take. If you have to do this 55 times, it won't work. And if you have to do this 55 times, once for each of the member states of the AU, by that time you will be picked apart by the other powers. Africa will just become a divided corpse. So we'll do an autopsy in 40 years, not Africa at the center of the world economy. So Africa, first and foremost, needs to think at a continental scale and operate at a continental scale. And one of the reasons why I'm optimistic is that's happening. Yes, too slowly. It's frustrating. But there truly, really is an African continental free trade area. It's real. It's going to become more real. It could be operationalized a lot faster. It should be operationalized a lot faster. If my colleague, Dr. Hippolyte Fofak, who was chief economist at Frexim Bank, gets his way, there will be an African Union currency. One currency for the continent. This is the right idea. This is practicable within the next 10 to 20 years. Really practicable. And absolutely the right thing to do to make a continental scale economy. The second thing that Africa needs is...
There is something about Africa's future that we need to start taking seriously, not because Africa needs sympathy, not because Africa needs someone to come and rescue it, but because the numbers are changing and they are changing fast. So guys, that's the kind of video that we are going to watch today. So stay tuned till the end, and remember you're going to buy me a coffee if you're going to click the subscription button. Otherwise, let's dive in.
Fourth is investment, investment, and investment. Three kinds of investment. Most important, please, every child on this continent should complete at least upper secondary school with real learning. So figure out how to do that. Give me a call. I have some ideas as well. Every child should have a device in their hand to be connected online. It can be a tablet, it can be a computer, it can be a smartphone, but they need to watch their classes online. They need to do assignments online. They need to have their AI personalized tutor helping them with that math problem online. It's virtually free to do this if you actually work out the capital costs. There should be no limits of teachers in rural areas or teachers that are underqualified or can't do a math problem, because we don't need the traditional delivery as the only delivery of education right now. We're in a digital world. You can leapfrog. Be creative, be inventive, but take the basic idea. Don't let the budget constraint stand in the way of universal quality education. It's by far the #1 resource of this continent, and it's growing very rapidly. And there is no demographic dividend of a young population if it is not educated. None at all, only a burden. The only demographic dividend is if all those young people have a proper education. So please figure out how to do this. And the education minister, the finance minister, the minister for digital technologies need to huddle together and say, how are we going to get this done? And one basic idea that I believe in is if you need to borrow long-term, find a 40-year loan from China or from the Gulf or other places to fill a financing gap, and then tell the kids, we're going to educate you, and when you are adults, you're going to have decent jobs, and wherever you're going to be, you're going to pay a 10% payroll tax because we educated you. So we're going to collect for your education, not in an onerous way, but in a way so that we can finance you today. Because I know the finance ministers of this continent, and they're responsible, and they say, we don't have a budget, Mr. Sachs, for universal education. And they go to the IMF, and the IMF doesn't think straight. And they say, so sorry, maybe you can't get all the kids in school. That's a shame. That is not the answer. The answer is all the kids are going to be in school, and we're going to figure out how to do it. And by the way, that's almost half the population of Africa. This has to be a whole continent in learning right now. This is a continent with a 19-year median age. Half the kids are at school age. I mean, half the population is at school age in this continent. Make sure they're learning. And then you get the transformation beyond anything we can dream today. The second major investment is physical infrastructure. And of course, that entails the power sector, the transport sector, the digital sector, social housing, water and sanitation. The key infrastructure. There needs to be an Africa-wide strategy that reaches down to every part of the continent. The power sector should tap your wind, solar, hydro, geothermal. This continent has enough high-quality solar to power the entire world, as you know. We've all seen the little box in the Sahara that has enough solar energy to power the entire world. Let me tell you, China has the solar module capacity to make Africa the solar power capital of the world. In other words, China's productive capacity is about 1,300 gigawatts of solar.
Now, guys, economist Jeffery points to something that could completely reshape the world in the coming decades. Africa's population is going to grow dramatically. So, by the middle of this century, Africa could represent around a quarter of the world's population. By the end of the century, that shares could rise even further. And guys, I want you to think about what that means. We are talking about hundreds of millions of young people who will need education, who are going to need jobs, electricity, housing, technology, and even opportunities. So, guys, the real question is not whether Africa will have people. Of course, Africa will have people. The question is, what will Africa do with all that human potential? And this is where Sachs makes an important argument. Sachs, he believes Africa needs to think beyond individual countries and start thinking more like one economic space. That means strengthening the Africa continental free trade area, improving transportation between countries, expanding electricity networks, connecting people digitally, and potentially even considering deeper monetary integration, guys. Because look at what happened in China, guys. China didn't become an economic powerhouse simply because it had a larger population. It built infrastructure, it invested in education, it developed industry, and it connected its enormous population to a broader economic strategy. So, guys, imagine what could happen if Africa began coordinating its enormous resources and human capital in the same way. And there's another part of this conversation that I think deserves attention. That is education, guys. You know how education is very important. Africa has one of the youngest population on earth. That could either become one of Africa's greatest advantages or one of its biggest challenges. If millions of young Africans receive a quality education and gain access to digital technology and artificial intelligence, the continent could create an entirely new generation of engineers, entrepreneurs, scientists, teachers, programmers, doctors, and even innovators. But if those young people don't have opportunities, the demographic advantage can quickly become a serious economic problem. And this is where the conversation becomes bigger than economics, guys. For generations, many African countries have depended heavily on foreign assistance. That is true. Look in Africa, they are depending on China. They're depending on those foreign countries, the Western countries. They're depending in foreign investment and outside institutions. And yes, international corporations can be valuable. But Africa also has to ask an uncomfortable question, guys. Are we building systems that makes us stronger or a system that keep us dependent? Because, guys, let me tell you something. Because development should not simply mean receiving help. Development should mean building the capacity to eventually stand on your own feet. In Africa, there are resources. Africa has land. Africa has a massive young population, guys. And increasingly, African has access to technology that previously, in the previous generations, could never have imagined. So the challenge is turning, those advantages into coordinated economic power. And perhaps that is the biggest message here, guys. Africa's future shouldn't be defined by what other countries think Africa can become. It should be defined by what Africans decide to build. And this isn't only about Africa itself, guys. Get me right. The African diaspora is part of this conversation too. Black people around the world have talent, they have knowledge, they have capital, creativity, and experience. Imagine what becomes possible when those resources are connected instead of isolated. So, guys, when we talk about Africa's population growing, we shouldn't only see a statistic, we should see potential. The question is whether Africa and the wider black world will organize that potential, invest in it, and turn it into lasting economic power, guys. You know, Guys, because the future isn't waiting for Africa. No, the future doesn't wait for anybody. The future is already arriving. And there's no perfect time of doing something, guys. And what Africa does with it could affect the entire world. That is what you know. I've told you that Africa is a very rich continent with a lot of resources. So they shouldn't wait for the future to come so that they may start using those resources. Otherwise, guys, peace.